Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
The beautiful city of Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada.
The buzz of excitement as Vancouver is announced as a host for the 2026 World Cup.
We are fighting an uphill battle right now with the rising costs of everything.
And with new steps to tackle rising inflation, the pressure to make tough choices is ramping up. Plus, a BC man allegedly linked to the fentanyl overdose deaths of 2 U.S. Navy members.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Anita Bathe. Well, a lot of excitement today with one of the biggest sporting events in the world coming to Vancouver. We have been named a host city for the 2026 FIFA World Cup tournament. And as Karen Larson tells us, there's work to be done to get ready, but the celebrations will be huge.
The beautiful city of Vancouver, British Columbia.
The crowd at BC Place Stadium didn't have to wait long for the happy news. Vancouver was the first of 21 sites in Canada, the United States, and Mexico announced as a host city for the men's 2026 FIFA World Cup. Toronto also made the cut. Edmonton did not. The province says hosting games at BC Place will cost around $250 million and will bring in about $1 billion of business.
But we see this as an investment for the future, and it's going to pay off.
Vancouver native and former national team star John Catliff says the games will provide a huge boost to soccer.
Having this come to Vancouver and to Canada is going to, I think, finally allow us to embrace soccer in a way as a nation that we really haven't in Canada because of hockey.
Canada has been guaranteed 10 games in total. The announcement of how they'll be split will be made at a future date, but the hot rumor is Vancouver could get as many as 6. When it comes to hosting games, there is one thing Vancouver has over Toronto, and it's this stadium, BC Place, capable of holding 55,000 fans. That's just good for business. More ticket sales, more beer sales, and more merchandise sales. BC Place will have to be outfitted with natural grass turf for the tournament, something that's mandatory for the Men's World Cup games. As well, there will be other amenities needed, like practice facilities and fan zones, all details that have yet to be worked out.
BC Place is one of the largest stadiums in the host city lineup, and of course we've got rapid transit, we've got the downtown core, we've got all of the restaurants and bars who will be very excited to hear this news, I'm sure.
As a host nation, the Canadian men's national team will have an automatic berth in the 2026 World Cup. Karen Larson, CBC News, Vancouver.
And here's a bit of my interview that's going to be coming up later in the show on what it's going to be like here in Vancouver.
The World Cup is so much bigger than the Olympics, and it's something we just aren't really aware of in our nation.
That's Carrie Sir-Wetnick, who will also tell us what we can expect from Canada's men's team that is coming up later in the show. Tonight, the federal government is warning to brace for more economic turbulence ahead while defending its efforts to help Canadians cope with inflation. Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland is detailing how the feds plan to help those who are most vulnerable. David Cochran now on the political pushback.
Chrystia Freeland is facing a rare challenge, a finance minister with record low unemployment and a strong economy, but with many Canadians struggling and anxious.
Why are Canadians so worried? I think everyone here knows the answer. Inflation.
It's a global problem fueled largely by global factors, but Freeland is facing acute domestic pressure to act.
People are hungry. People need help. And so our approach is let's give people real help in a meaningful way.
The GST, for example, is something that can be taken right off at the pump, and Canadians will see that. That will help them to deal with some of the short-term issues when it comes to groceries.
This speech was Freeland's rebuttal against calls for new measures, pointing to a series of steps taken in the last 2 budgets that roll out this summer.
A new set of measures is coming into force right now to help the Canadians who need it most. This is $8.9 billion in new support for Canadians this year.
That includes a boost to old age security and benefits for low-income workers, cutting childcare fees, and indexing programs like the Canada Child Benefit, GST rebate, and the CPP to inflation.
Well, maybe doing nothing is the right thing to do. The last thing we need is the government to add more net stimulus to the economy.
That's the path Freeland is following, at least for now. Freeland argues these measures are enough for the short term, though she isn't ruling out future action if inflation remains high. David Cochran, CBC News, Ottawa.
Many Canadians are already feeling the squeeze from the high cost of living. Susanna De Silva caught up with some forced to make tough choices about how they spend their money.
Okay, Roshan, do you want to open the door?
There are a lot more visits to the park these days. It's free and within walking distance.
We were doing okay until the gas prices started to go up, and then the food prices started to go way up. And then we realized, hey, wait a minute, we're just digging into our savings. You want to hop on the rocks?
So Amy Martin started working more, part-time in the evenings after her husband comes home to save on childcare.
Good morning.
Hi, Nana. How are you?
It's also meant fewer trips in the car, including those 45-minute drives to see her 90-year-old grandmother.
We would like to be visiting her, at least once a week, but now it's kind of more like once or twice a month, if that, just because we really have to prioritize our trips on the weekend.
From gas to rent to groceries, the cost of living is rising faster than it has in 30 years.
We're spending over $600 to $700 more every month.
Parminder Brar says shopping for her family of 4 plus elderly mother is hard work.
When we buy stuff, we just see what the prices are and compare the prices with different stores and stuff, and then try to buy individual stuff. And that's how I try to shop these days.
It's why people have been turning to blogs like this.
Your local Buy Nothing group, just how to really utilize rewards programs, coupons, deals. And we definitely are seeing a lot of people that are thanking us for that, and a lot more searches for that information.
But for some seniors, the ability to trim budgets is limited.
We're seeing people make terrible decisions between, do I pay my rent or do I take my prescriptions?
Martin would like to see more government support, especially around food.
And it's tough when you have these little guys who don't really understand. But it is tough to just keep saying no to them.
For now, it will be more playground calls with Nana. Susanna De Silva, CBC News, Surrey.
A BC man and a British citizen have now been charged for allegedly running an online global drug and money laundering scheme that's linked to the toxic drug deaths of U.S. Navy members. Dan Burrett joins us live with more. And Dan, quite the web, and this case dates back several years.
Since 2017, Anita, quite complicated. The RCMP says that's when its federal organized crime unit launched a joint transnational investigation into an alleged global dark web drug trafficking seller named Canada One. American authorities were looking into the toxic fentanyl deaths of 2 U.S. Navy personnel. They found packaging allegedly linking the drugs to Canada One and believed the drugs were shipped from Canada to the petty officers in Georgia. Mounties connected Canada One to a home in West Vancouver, intercepted several packages of fentanyl being shipped to the seller. In March 2018, police arrested a Canadian man and a British man on the North Shore. They also seized a huge amount of fentanyl and mail tracking slips that lined up with the drug packaging found by U.S. officials. The UK man was deported back to Britain. Now, years later, both men have been charged in the U.S. Officials allege they conspired to import drugs from China and Hungary while using the business names East Van Eco Tours and Bridge City Consulting.
On May 24th, 2022, BC RCMP Federal Serious and Organized Crime Program Cybercrime Operations Group arrested Thomas Michael Federic of West Vancouver, while his alleged co-conspirator Paul Anthony Nichols of Surrey, United Kingdom, was simultaneously arrested by UK authorities.
The charges come as almost 10,000 people have been killed by poison drugs in BC alone since 2016. We lost more than 2,200 people just last year. Now, the 2 men charged are awaiting extradition to Georgia. If they are convicted in that U.S. state, authorities say they could serve a minimum of 10 years in prison to life and be fined millions of dollars. Anita.
Dan Burrett live for us tonight. Thank you. It's been contentious since the day it was announced, and now a new poll finds most British Columbians oppose a pricey rebuild of the Royal BC Museum. Mira Baines has more on what it could mean for the government and how the opposition is responding.
The Royal BC Museum project, with an 8-year timeline and an estimated price tag of $789 million, isn't sitting well with most British Columbians. That's the finding in a new survey by Angus Reid.
It's a total waste of money. So much better things to spend on these days. Gas is more expensive.
Our voices will not be silent.
The artifacts and give it back to the First Nations.
Angus Reid says overall research data shows 69% of those polled oppose the expensive rebuild, while 22%, about 1 in 5, support it.
So why not take the time to make it better and make it a world-class destination?
While the data shows the project landed with a thud, it also concludes the opposition BC Liberals have yet to capitalize on the issue.
Where a lot of BC Liberal supporters are more fervently or vehemently against it. You do note that nearly half of NDP voters also think that this is not the right plan, this is not the right project.
The BC Liberals have slammed Premier John Horgan for the project. They recently released this ad, painting the NDP as being out of touch with everyday people struggling with affordability. Horgan's approval rating has dropped 7 points to 48%, but the NDP is still 11 points ahead of the Liberals. The New Democrats fired back with an ad of their own against Liberal leader Kevin Falcon, who has been leading the charge against the museum rebuild. The Angus Reid survey found he's viewed favorably by 23% of British Columbians and unfavorably by 44%.
While people are expressing annoyance, anger, kind of a what the heck feeling towards their premier and their provincial government, it doesn't necessarily mean that it is causing them to start drifting away in terms of vote intention from the NDP to the BC Liberals. We've actually seen almost no movement in the last 3 months on that front.
A test of which way political winds are blowing could come later this year with a by-election in Surrey. Mira Baines, CBC News, Vancouver.
It's been 4 years since Canada legalized cannabis, and since then, Ottawa has sent BC more than $1 million in tax revenue, but not a penny has gone to the towns and cities that have made it possible for those legal pot shops to open. The Union of BC Municipalities says they deserve a share of those profits, arguing this was the intention all along. Port Coquitlam's mayor says the city worked quickly to pass bylaws that allowed some of the first dispensaries to open in the province.
Because of the work that local government has done to establish this industry, other levels of government are now benefiting from the revenue. So it seems to make sense and would be fair that at least a portion, even a small portion, would be returned to the level of government that has been able to make this happen on the ground.
In response, the province says cannabis revenue has fallen short of expectations, and BC is recuperating those costs. 3 people have died in a multi-car collision this morning on Highway 5 north of Kamloops. Police say the victims are 2 adults and a baby. The RCMP are investigating the cause and are not releasing details. The crash involved a semi-truck near Vinsula, a small town along the Thompson River, 30 kilometers north of Kamloops. Well, dozens of North Vancouver seniors left homeless by a fire last month are looking for permanent homes. Their temporary housing runs out next week, and for many of them, they have nowhere to go. Zara Premji now on their desperate search for a solution.
But these seniors need someone else to help them now.
Advocates are calling for help as the clock runs out for seniors forced by fire from their homes in late May. The fire at Lynn Valley's Silverlyn Apartments claimed 1 life and has left more than 24 residents without a home.
The bulk of the seniors displaced by the fire are staying in residence at UBC, where the bill for the residence is currently being paid for by the North Shore Emergency Management and provincial government.
But the money to house them is running out.
So there's absolutely no guarantee that people will have a place to live after next Tuesday.
Desperate situation for our seniors. If they don't have, there can't be uncovered a place for them to live, they risk the reality of homelessness.
Advocates are pleading with community members and neighbors to step up.
It's unlivable and it will take a long time to restore. And if there are empty suites or places that you don't usually rent that you would be willing to rent for subsidized amounts to seniors who are in desperate need while the building is being replaced, which we anticipate will be about 1 year, we invite you to call us at North Shore Community Resources.
Peter Phelan was one of the lucky few able to return to the portion of Silverlin apartments still considered livable, but his daughter says don't forget the rest.
If you have a heart and you have a spare room, you know, these seniors are, you know, pretty low maintenance and quiet, and, you know, they just want to live their years, what they have left, in peace and quiet.
BC Housing tells CBC News it is working on identifying available subsidized housing and has sped up the application process, but no word on if the housing will be secured before the temporary funding ends.
This could be any one of us. This could be any one of us in our older years in a really difficult situation. And at this time, I call on community to really step up.
And the worry is time is running out. Zara Premji, CBC News, North Vancouver.
For the second day in a row, a serious incident at Killarney Secondary in South Vancouver has disrupted the school. This morning, the building was sent into lockdown, and police say it was out of an abundance of caution.
Just after 10 o'clock this morning, we received a 911 call reporting with a credible report that there was a person inside Killarney Secondary in possession of a weapon.
Teachers, students, and staff were ordered to shelter in place. No one was hurt, and police spent 2 hours searching the school, though did not locate any suspects. This comes after the school was evacuated yesterday because a student from another school used pepper spray inside. In that incident, police say the teenager was targeting one individual, and people did have to be treated in hospital. Well, Central Okanagan search and rescue crews have suspended their search for a missing Kelowna woman. As Tom Popick tells us, Chelsea Cardno is believed to have been swept away by floodwaters on Tuesday.
Ed Hensel with Central Okanagan Search and Rescue says crews haven't given up hopes to find 31-year-old Chelsea Cardno. This is just a pause.
We've covered Mission Creek from our last known position all the way to Okanagan Lake with ground teams, swiftwater teams, drones, helicopters, boat in the lake. We haven't seen anything. The weather is changing.
Search efforts could resume Saturday. Cardno was last seen Tuesday morning, her car parked near Kelowna's Mission Creek, where she regularly walked her German Shepherd JJ. Torrential overnight rains had turned the creek into a raging river, destabilizing the shore. RCMP are treating this as a missing persons case, but they have no indication Cardno is somewhere else. Tom Popick, CBC News, Kelowna.
Well, permanent repairs are coming to the flood-damaged Coquihalla Highway and Highway 1. Work will soon start to bring back the Coquihalla to 4 lanes. It will start this summer at 3 main sites: Bottle Top Bridges south of Merritt, plus the Juliet and Jessica Bridges. November's flooding damaged more than 20 sites between Hope and Merritt. 7 bridges completely collapsed or were heavily damaged.
The main thing is to reinstate all the lanes that were lost and have a fully functioning highway again. And the biggest part in terms of new engineering thinking about the rebuilt Coquihalla is to have principles around climate resilience incorporated into the design.
Work is expected to pretty much be complete this winter, with crews working overnight when possible to limit traffic delays. 3 sites along Highway 1 through the Fraser Canyon near Spence's Bridge will also be repaired. Johanna is away, and Amy Bell joins us now with the forecast. Amy, I've got to say it's been pretty beautiful, but yesterday, today, a little cold.
A little chilly, I know. You got to dig out that winter coat again, unfortunately. It's still a bit unsettled, but we've seen things clearing up after another unsettled day. So we did see some shower activity. We did see some sun, even a little bit of wind for a bit. But settling down this evening, temperatures actually not too bad at this point. 20 degrees at the Pitt Meadows Airport, 19 in Abbotsford, and 17 at Vancouver Airport. So we'll see things dropping down closer to the 10-degree mark overnight. As you can see, though, we did have some fairly active active weather at times. Some lightning strikes in the last couple of hours in the Kamloops area, also near Prince George and Cranbrook, and very unsettled, unfortunately, for the rest of the evening and into the overnights. Tomorrow does seem to settle down, though we'll still be left with a chance of showers in some areas of the Kootenays and for the interior, but definitely trending towards a drier and brighter day tomorrow and even a little bit warmer. Overnight for us, though, we will see even further clearing, so partial mix of sun, or not a mix of sun and cloud, but partial clouds overnight, dropping down to 12 around midnight, 10 around 4 a.m. So that will be the lowest. And then we'll start off with plenty of sunshine, but we'll see increasing cloud as we head into the afternoon. And Saturday at this point looks to be cloudy with a chance of showers, but I'll have all the details in just a few minutes.
Sounds good. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks, Amy.
You're welcome.
As we continue to dig through the 1,800-page report on money laundering in BC, more details are emerging about which politicians knew what was happening in our casinos. As the CBC's Michelle Gassoub reports, 3 out of 5 elected officials singled out are said to have contributed to the increase of dirty money in this province.
The Cullen Commission's report into BC's money laundering crisis zeroes in on 5 elected officials, including 1 premier who touched the gaming file during their time in office. Here's what Cullen found about what they knew at the time and what actions they took and failed to take to stop dirty money from flowing into the province. Rich Coleman was the minister responsible for gaming for 3 periods. From 2001 to 2005, there was very little money laundering in the province, but from 2008 to 2011, it starts to pick up speed. Cullen found that by 2010, Coleman was presented with significant evidence that money laundering was becoming a massive problem. But instead of taking action, Coleman downplayed the issue in the media, making these comments in 2011 after the CBC aired a story where a senior RCMP officer confirmed he'd found dirty money.
I don't think you get to go make a comment like that when you're in charge of a section that's supposed to actually be doing the investigations.
Cullen found there was a need to take aggressive action during this period as the issue spiraled out of control. He found Coleman failed to do so. Shirley Bond was gaming minister for less than a year, from 2011 to 2012, a critical period when money laundering was accelerating. But Cullen found she had little experience on the file and wasn't briefed properly on the issue. He ultimately concludes that while Bond missed opportunities to stop money laundering, she wasn't responsible for its growth. Mike DeYoung was the minister responsible for gaming from 2013 to 2017. During DeYoung's tenure, money laundering accelerated and reached its peak. From 2013 to 2015, Cullen found that DeYoung took no meaningful action, but it doesn't appear he was given information about the extent of the problem. In September 2015, he was finally made aware of just how much suspicious money was flowing into casinos, over $195 million in 2014 alone. Almost immediately, he creates the Joint Illegal Gaming Investigation Team and issues a letter to the BC Lottery Corporation. Cullen concludes that DeYoung acted swiftly once he saw the evidence, but that considering the extent of the crisis, the actions he took were not enough and lacked urgency.
Those of us who served in the previous government need to acknowledge that, and I certainly do.
Christy Clark was premier from 2011 to 2017, the worst period for money laundering in BC. Cullen found that Clark was aware and concerned about money laundering after reading about it in news stories. But from 2011 to 2015, she largely trusted her ministers to stay on top of the problem. Between 2015 and 2017, Clark was directly warned of troubling developments. But she didn't talk to DeYoung about immediate steps to stop suspicious cash from entering the province's casinos, and she didn't seek out more information to understand how to stop the problem. Cullen acknowledged that as Premier, Clark had a massive portfolio, but says by 2015 it should have been a priority for her. He found her failure to act did contribute to a rise in money laundering. In 2017, David Eby became BC's Attorney General and the minister responsible for gaming. He was briefed by the BCLC and the Gaming Policy and Enforcement Branch, which painted 2 very different pictures of how bad the problem was. Eby decided to seek independent advice. That led to former RCMP Commissioner Peter German's 2018 report called Dirty Money, which found that $100 million had been cleaned in BC thanks to collective system failure. Cullen concluded that Eby, like Bond, was not responsible for the rise of money laundering in BC. He found that Coleman, Clark, and DeYoung showed a failure of will to deal with the problem. Cullen said the three politicians could and should have taken more actions to stop it, but he stopped short of calling it corruption, saying none of them appear to have been motivated by political, personal, or financial gain. Michelle Gassoub, CBC News, Vancouver.
Coming up after the break, the crowds, the parties, and the international tourism. What bringing the World Cup to Vancouver will mean for this city. Thanks for watching our commercial-free live stream. A Halifax man is getting set to leave for one of the toughest sailing races in the world. It's called the Golden Globe Race 2022. Now, what makes it so tough is that they can't use any technology that was made after 1968. Colleen Jones has the story.
We are required to test jury rig.
Edward Valtenovich is working on all the little details that are all so important as he preps his boat, Noah's Jest, for the trip of a lifetime.
There's probably like 500 different tasks I'm trying to juggle.
He plans to leave his berth at the Armadale Yacht Club on Sunday for the UK, then on to France for the start of the Golden Globe race early September. Now, the race's slogan, Sailing Like It's 1968, means you better be an expert in a lot of things pre-technology, and at the top of that list, astronavigation.
The first time I navigated by the stars, by the sun mainly, in 1984.
We first met Edward last year when he finished his first solo transatlantic trip. That was his 7th transatlantic trip, and it was the one that qualified him for the Golden Globe race.
The boat is 32 years old, right? And he's going to attempt the toughest race and the longest race in the world.
Like all the other racers, once the race begins, you're on your own.
Around Lanzarote, there is so-called photo gate, where media can approach and from a distance take an interview. And the race committee is telling us that they will check if we're visually okay to continue. Nobody can touch, nobody can supply anything. It's just the media and the safety check.
His inspiration for all this, Nova Scotia's Joshua Slocum. In the late 1800s, Captain Slocum was the very first person to complete a circumnavigation of the world solo. He's read Slocum's book, Sailing Around the World, which is still in print today. He'll travel with that book, too. And beside the chair where he'll sleep is a painting of Slocum's boat, Spray.
Well, I'm trying to follow his footsteps. I'm not as experienced as he was. He was like a tall ship's captain who was kind of lost later on when the steamships started arriving, and he came up with this solo race around the world, and he was the first man to do it.
Inside his tiny cabin is where he'll navigate.
Here a chart table, some charts, and here is my main compass.
There's the chair he'll sleep in for a couple of hours every night.
See my steering and everything from here, and I can nod, and I'm safe in the rough weather.
Here's to no rough weather, but a great adventure. Colleen Jones, CBC News, Halifax.
Back to our top story tonight. The men's 2026 FIFA World Cup is officially coming to BC, with Vancouver named a host city for the event. Here's a little more from that announcement today, courtesy of TSN.
Will it be Toronto, Edmonton, Vancouver? We'll find out now as we take you to New York City for FIFA's announcement.
And I am pleased to announce the first city, the beautiful city of Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada.
Just amazing. Michael Bublé was even part of the excitement, accepting on behalf of the city. Toronto is also among the 16 chosen for the event. 11 are in the U.S. and 3 are in Mexico. It's not clear how the games will be split up between the two Canadian host cities. Okay, so a lot for this city and the country to look forward to. Let's bring in a retired professional player, former national team striker, and the first woman inducted into Canada's Soccer Hall of Fame, Carrie Serwetnyk. Carrie, let's begin with Vancouver as a 2026 World Cup host city. This city has hosted its share of marquee sports events in the past, including the Olympics. How will the World Cup compare? What are we in for in terms of the excitement?
Well, obviously, this is extraordinary news for us. It's so fantastic. And what comes to my mind is I think we're naive as a country with the World Cup. It's taken us over 3 decades to finally qualify for, Qatar in the upcoming future. It is going to be like the biggest event in Vancouver. The World Cup is so much bigger than the Olympics. And it's something we just aren't really aware of in our nation, right? And so I think the Women's World Cup in 2015 gave us a kind of a bit of a wake up. People were surprised to see all the American fans and people coming in to celebrate the game. It's going to be so much bigger. I think we just saw that for the fans who travel from all over the country just to see a friendly against, Canada and the, potential Pan Am or Iran game. People are willing to go anywhere to see them. It's going to be, 100 times bigger than that when we see, star countries coming in and our own team playing. So this is, we all need good news right now. And so this is going to hopefully uplift not just soccer fans, but local businesses and, just the community. So good for us, good for Toronto.
Yeah, I'm super excited just for the vibe around town that's going to come with this. Now, you talked about us being a little bit naive when it comes to the World Cup. BC Place needs to make some changes to prepare for players of this caliber. What will it take to impress a global audience?
Well, 100%. I mean, the first thing and most obvious, and maybe other countries in the world would laugh at this, but we need to get the grass, into the stadium. And I don't think it's fair if I don't mention that the Women's World Cup was played on artificial turf, and that was the first time ever. No matter how many lawsuits happened, they didn't change that. And just in a split second, of course, we're going to have grass for the Men's World Cup. I think it's going to be a phenomenal change for our country and our city because the Whitecaps need to be playing on grass. Like, star players won't come to Vancouver for that very reason. They don't want to get hurt. It's a subpar surface compared to grass. So we're going to see just that one change is going to, be great for fans, great for players.
And Carrie, just quickly here before we let you go, that tournament is 4 years away. Before then, of course, the men's national team plays in the World Cup just a few months from now. What is this current team capable of?
I think we might be the new Iceland, right? They were such underdogs for the last tournament, and then they went and tied Argentina. So you never know when you have these committed players who really play as a team, like our like the Canadian boys. Like they've had such great energy with each other, and they've played as a team. And John Herman's an amazing coach. So I'd love to see us, squeak into the quarterfinals to surprise people.
Absolutely. Here's hoping. Former striker for Canada's national team, Carrie Serwetnyk. Thank you.
Thank you.
RCMP officers swept in on a neighborhood outside of Quebec City, targeting people connected to a neo-Nazi group. Why the raid and why the escalation is next.
Figuring out
that's it.
how can I solve it using mathematical tools.
This is typical of the frenetic pace of a video editing suite. Everything happens very fast.
Sure he is. Look at him closely.
Cutting film is quite a different matter. It's a slow, careful process. It takes a long time in a fast world. That's why the splicing and taping you're watching right now is it, the last piece of film that will ever be cut at the CBC in Vancouver. It's kind of like the last spike in the railway. Film built the CBC, but it's videotape that will take us into the 21st century. Less than 10 years ago, these booths were filled with Steenbeck film edit machines. Now they are strictly electronic video suites. One look at the technology, and it's not hard to figure out why.
The CBC Television News. From the worldwide facilities of the CBC, film stories and the latest news reports.
This is a film clip from 1956 showing how news was gathered then. The film camera looks mobile enough, but check out the editing format. And that says nothing of the 2-hour processing time required to develop the film. So if a fire happened at 4 o'clock, the chances of getting it to air by 6 were slim to none. And that's if the fire was in Vancouver. News Centre veteran Bob Gillingham remembers more than one occasion during his days of covering the legislature in Victoria when making the show was dependent upon a good pitching arm.
I had a 3:15 deadline every afternoon. That would mean I would have to have the film we had used that day put on the airplane, the float plane, flying from Victoria to Vancouver by about 3:15 because of the processing time. And nothing very much happened in Victoria in the legislature until much later in the day. So many times we would have a panic situation where we only had minutes to get our film to the plane to get it to Vancouver.
And that wasn't the end of the scramble. Sound was recorded separately.
The film that had the picture on it also had the soundtrack running down one side. However, that soundtrack, being right beside the picture, was not always where the film editor wanted. You might want to take a cut in the picture right there, but the sound for that particular picture was a little farther down here. So what we would do is we would transfer the sound from this onto a separate piece of soundtrack right here. That way the film editor could cut the film wherever they wanted and then cut the soundtrack wherever they wanted.
These days, pictures and sound pop out on one ready-to-edit tape. The system is a whole lot easier. For people like film editor Des Risden, that may be true. But with the last cut on this old machine, a bit of magic will have died.
It's a very sensual medium, and it allows us to work on it, look at it, and reflect on it. Whereas in video, you can't. You're so pressured for time, you have to get it out yesterday.
Michelle Gibson, CBC News, Vancouver.
Raids today in Quebec by the RCMP on what the government considers a terrorist group. Search warrants were carried out in 2 towns. As Jennifer Yoon reports, police were targeting a neo-Nazi organization.
About 60 RCMP investigators descended on Place Civile and Saint-Ferdinand in central Quebec today, targeting individuals with connections to the far-right group Division Atomwaffen. Police say there is no threat to public safety.
We can assure the public that all means have been put in place for the security of the public, and there was no danger to the population or to our police officers today.
The international neo-Nazi terror group calls for acts of violence against racial, religious, and ethnic groups to prompt what they call the collapse of society. Members of the group have also carried out violent acts, including at rallies in Charlottesville, Virginia in 2017, according to the federal government. The chair of the Canadian Anti-Hate Network says he's impressed by authorities taking swift action.
They are a group that we've been, many of us have been watching for a long time, only because of how dangerous they are.
Police say the operation is part of an ongoing investigation which started in 2020 and that they are not expecting to make any arrests today. This former national security analyst and a professor at Carleton University says that may change in the coming weeks.
All of these ingredients suggest that this actually is a fairly serious investigation. We don't just execute these warrants in hope of furthering investigations. You really want to do it in order to prosecute individuals who may actually be involved in violent extremist activities.
This researcher says while hate groups have been expanding over the past 2 years, it's good that the Canadian authorities are taking preemptive action before senseless tragedies take place.
Raids like this can offer a deterrent for anybody who may be a part of that group that found themselves sort of on the edge on whether or not they were going to follow through. Maybe this will be a deterrent.
Jennifer Yoon, CBC News, Montreal.
And we have new details about Donald Trump's pressure on Mike Pence to overturn the 2020 election. It was the focus today for the Capitol Attack Investigation Committee. As Susan Ormiston reports, witnesses say Trump was warned to have Pence fail to certify the results were illegal.
Donald Trump wanted Mike Pence to do something no other vice president has ever done.
That is, refuse to certify the 2020 votes and overturn the election. And when Pence said no, Trump squeezed him hard, right up to the morning of January 6th. With family and staff listening in, Trump called Pence and berated him.
The conversation was pretty heated.
Or if he said, "You are a wimp, you'll be a wimp." Wimp is the word I remember.
It was a different tone than I'd heard him take.
The P word.
Trump was told Pence could not constitutionally upend the result, but the president clung instead to contrary advice from a lawyer, John Eastman, who said Pence could. And on January 6th, Trump turned up the pressure to a boil.
And Mike Pence, I hope you're going to stand up for the good of our Constitution. And if you're not, I'm going to be very disappointed in you.
Inciting his supporters, says the committee.
Bring out Pence!
Pence, spirited away to a secure room for the next 4 hours, watched as Trump tweeted that the vice president lacked courage, upping the danger, according to an informant.
Told the FBI that the Proud Boys would have killed Mike Pence if given a chance.
Pence is widely considered a potential candidate in 2024, and he's never revealed how Trump treated him. But last February, finally rebuked his former boss.
President Trump is wrong. I had no right to overturn the election.
Our movement had a series of blockbuster victories.
Yet Donald Trump is still peddling the fraudulent election, and he has an avid audience.
The percentage of people who believe the election was stolen, thanks to the lies of the losing candidate, has remained fairly static since November of 2020. It's roughly 30% of the American population.
As a part of the select...
The January 6th committee is trying to move that needle.
Whether it's going to change any minds, for most of us, the answer is we just don't know.
That's Susan Ormiston reporting from Washington, D.C. tonight. Well, it's not looking good for international cosmetics giant Revlon. The beauty products company has filed for bankruptcy protection in the U.S. The 90-year-old company, which includes brands like Almay and Elizabeth Arden, has been a mainstay on store shelves for decades. But in recent years, it has struggled with rising debts, tougher competition, and pandemic-related supply chain problems. The Chapter 11 filing covers Revlon's U.S., UK, and Canadian operations. The company is hoping for a $575 million lifeline from its current lenders. The largest gas company in Russia is triggering renewed concerns about energy supplies in Europe. Gazprom has cut capacity in one of the continent's largest pipelines, which connects Russia to Germany. As Trent Murray reports, the company says Canada's sanctions against Moscow over the war in Ukraine are to blame.
Well, the Russian energy giant Gazprom had been threatening in recent days that it would start cutting supplies to the Nord Stream 1 pipeline. And the German government has confirmed to CBC News this morning that the Russians made good on that threat overnight. That just after midnight local time, technical readings here showed a significant slowing down of the amount of gas travelling through that pipeline to Germany. Now, the government is also saying that energy security is guaranteed, but they are asking consumers to try and reduce the amount of electricity they use in response to this cut. Now, why is it happening now? Well, that is the question that many are asking, and the answer depends slightly on who you ask. The Russian side says they need to carry out regular maintenance on the pipeline, in particular to specialist turbine engines that control the amount of pressure within it. Now, those engines are made by Siemens Energy, a major global manufacturer, and Siemens Energy says there is only one facility in the world that is able to do the maintenance, and that is in Montreal. They say in a statement, though, that due to the sanctions imposed by Canada, it is currently impossible for Siemens Energy to deliver those overhauled gas turbines back to Gazprom. Now, the German government isn't necessarily buying that. They say that this maintenance isn't needed right now, and that this move is political, designed to try and put pressure here on the government and to drive up prices. But nevertheless, we understand there are conversations happening between Berlin and Ottawa to try and see if there can be a workaround to get these turbines back to Gazprom. But it is yet another reminder of just how reliant Europe is on Russia for its energy needs. Countries like Germany and many others now working very, very hard to find alternative sources of energy, especially ahead of the winter. Trent Murray for CBC News, Berlin.
And China is being accused of using its health app to block protests. Hundreds of people say they've planned to go to a provincial capital to complain that their bank accounts had been frozen. But when they tried to travel, their health apps flashed red, so they weren't allowed to go. But as Patrick Falk tells us, none of them had tested positive for COVID.
Well, these health apps, and there are different kinds in different parts of the world, have really become part of daily life in China over the last couple of years. And without a green QR status, you're blocked from going to a lot of public spaces, from going on public transport, and importantly, it prevents you from traveling across the country. They were, of course, created to try and contain the spread of the virus, but now apparently it's being used for an entirely different reason. There have been pockets of protests, mainly in towns and villages across Henan province, over the last month after 4 rural banks blocked people from accessing about $30 million worth of deposits. And when some of them had planned to go to Zhengzhou, the capital of Henan province, to protest and to try and get some answers from the bank as well as government officials, we're told that their health apps then turned red. So this has really caused a lot of concern about abuse of these apps and using them to stifle dissent. And it's caused a real backlash online with people calling for those responsible to be punished under the law. But it should be said, those concerns have always been there, really, and now we're seeing them play out as people had been worried about.
Patrick Falk for CBC News, Beijing.
At 6:45, a live look tonight at Science World and False Creek. Warming up just a bit. Might we even see above average temperatures this weekend? We'll find out from Amy next. Okay, when most people go to Coquitlam, you don't really have to travel too far to see amazing wildlife. But for one visitor, the amazing wildlife came right to him. Feroz Javad hadn't even been in Coquitlam for an entire day when he had these unexpected guests, an entire family of black bears. Now, the mama stood guard while one of the cubs climbed a tree, and Javad caught it all on camera. As cute as they are, conservation officers urge caution. Don't approach a bear and try to keep a distance of at least 100 meters. But of course, try to film it if you can, from a safe distance.
From a safe distance.
Or from inside.
I would have no trouble keeping a safe distance. Adorable, but scary.
Yeah, absolutely.
We are looking fairly good for the weather right now. Things definitely cleared up. We saw very unsettled conditions, though, of course, throughout the day. So we had some clouds, even some showers, quite intense cells in a few spots, such as Burnaby this afternoon. But things definitely have settled down, and we'll stay partly clear through the overnight hours. So that'll give us a good chance to dry out and staying dry tomorrow. In fact, things that do settle down for many areas of the province tomorrow. It will remain a little bit unsettled in the sort of Cranbrook area and Prince George, but we will see a lot of that precipitation dissipating and moving further off into Edmonton. But we do have some more cells lined up, as we're not completely out of the woods. But tomorrow should stay dry for us here in Metro Vancouver. It'll be a gorgeous day on Vancouver Island with plenty of sunshine, and up for the northern half of the province as well, staying clear, sunny, and quite warm at times. As I mentioned, though, gorgeous on Vancouver Island. You'll look at 21 degrees in Comox, 17 in Tofino and Victoria. A little bit warmer but cloudier as you head out into the Fraser Valley. Dease Lake at 19, Prince Rupert at 14 with plenty of sunshine. But as I said, still seeing a chance of showers or even some thunderstorms around Prince George and Kelowna. Cranbrook especially unsettled tomorrow morning, and then hopefully things begin to ease off as we head into the afternoon. Taking a look at the weekend ahead, it'll be a little bit of a mixed bag, which we've gotten awfully used to over the last couple of months, in fact. Tomorrow, though, we'll start off sunnier, then we'll end with that increasing cloud throughout the day. Clouds and a chance of showers on Saturday with a high of 18, and then we'll dry up for Sunday, so just in time for Father's Day. You could maybe have a barbecue outside or go for a nice walk. We'll reach 20 degrees, clouding over, but staying dry, most importantly, for Monday and Tuesday as well.
At least we'll get a bit of warmth. I like it.
I like it too. We could use a bit more, though.
For sure. Thanks, Amy.
You're welcome.
Months of rehab have paid off for a group of penguins in South America. These 12 penguins waddled their way back to the sea this week in Argentina. They were rescued and brought back to good health by a group called the Mundo Marino Foundation. Many had been injured or were suffering from dehydration and malnutrition. Some had hypothermia because they'd lost so many feathers. Vets say possible causes include climate change, food scarcity, and pollution. Well, she's called the Monkey Lady, and it's pretty obvious why. How stuffed monkeys took over one woman's life next.
At first glance, Bacquareau Point is a little piece of coastal heaven where the lupins grow wild and the foghorn seems to always blow. It's here at this jagged point, though, Scotian Shores and the cleanup project have mobilized.
This place hasn't been cleaned and they say never, so.
Really?
Yeah.
So this is...
decades of buildup.
That's Angela Riley. The goal is to clean up the mess. Now, Bacquareau Point sits just outside of Barrington Passage, and they call themselves the lobster capital of Canada. The downside to that, the way the winds blow here, ghost gear washes up on this rocky shore. Percy Renahan fishes these waters. He's out on his four-wheeler hauling lost traps and other junk off the rocks.
Most of that section's cleared. Just up this way a little farther, maybe.
That the fishers are working side by side with citizen environmentalists is a big thing.
Today was breaking the Berlin Wall day for me because there's a history of fishers and shoreline cleaners not getting along because a lot of people see this stuff and they automatically assume that it was thrown overboard, and that's just not the case. A lot of what we found today are lost traps because they have tags on them, and if you've seen how rough the coast is, so getting the fishers and the shoreline cleaners working together and educating one another is a really big happy thing for me, and they've got the tools and the know-how, and them boys know how to stack some trap.
This gear has been piling up for years, getting jammed into rocks. It's very heavy to haul out too. That's why it takes such a concerted team effort to get rid of it.
The traps have been here for so long, they've almost become part of the landscape sometimes.
But they all want it out of the landscape. Richard Branham backs up into the path close to the shore to haul another load.
They're all mangled. They're hard to move around and stuff when they get all tangled together.
Volunteers ran either truckloads of steel traps or their 4x4 stacked high back to the main parking lot at the lighthouse. Welcome to home base.
Oh yeah, we're making a dent. We're making a dent for sure.
Eddie Simmons is with the cleanup project. Like Angela, cleaning the shorelines is his passion. As he approaches the 8th hour of hauling traps, he wants to keep moving.
There's a little bit of responsibility that comes along with the cleanups, right? If we've pulled it out and put it in the way of the tide, then it's our responsibility to take it off. So we'll have to do a scan, and anything that is in that kind of jeopardy, then we're going to have to act on.
When it was all finished, they hauled over 800 pounds of garbage and 350 lobster traps. The traps were destined for the recycling plant. Some of the rope can be repurposed. The rest of the garbage, it's off to the landfill.
Making big ripples. Oh, yeah. Every little bit helps, right?
They know this is a dent and a ripple in the ocean garbage problem, but they've checked Bacaro Point off their cleanup bucket list. And the shoreline, well, it looks pretty pristine again. Colleen Jones, CBC News, Bacaro Point.
Hi, I'm Anita Bathe, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox. CBC Vancouver is a proud returning media partner of the Talking Stick Festival, June 12th to July 3rd. Enjoy and explore Indigenous culture through art, dance, theatre, film, and more. Get tickets at fullcircle.ca and celebrate summer with Corleone at Pop Capella on June 25th. Come and enjoy high-impact harmonies and your favorite hits by pop legends. Learn more at corleone.org.
The survivor of a near-fatal shooting is making a plea for people to roll up their sleeves and give during National Blood Donor Week.
Luckily, Canadian Blood Services had enough blood for me, and I became one of their largest consumers of blood on a daily basis. When I was at the VGH hospital in the trauma center, they put 60 units of blood in my body. Every time I see a blood donor clinic, I think of how fortunate I am.
8 years ago, Paul Dragon was shot by a former employee outside his bicycle store in downtown Vancouver. He lost 80% of his blood that day, and he says if it wasn't for donations countless strangers made to Canadian Blood Services, he would have died. Every year, 100,000 donors are needed to meet the needs. Other ways to help include stem cell or organ and tissue donation. And before we go tonight, it's not uncommon for people to have a favorite animal, but a woman in New Brunswick has a deep affection for monkeys, and her home is a haven for primates. Meet the Jane Goodall of stuffed animals.
When we first started, I went to a yard sale and there was this great big monkey, so I bought it, put it up in the tree, and then the kids started bringing me monkeys, and now I bought monkeys at every yard sale I could find. So that's how I got the monkey lady, and that's how it started.
Well, I come home from work one day, and my wife had been in a yard sale with one of the neighbors, and there was this big monkey sitting on the doorstep. And after that, she went out to yard sales and bought a few more.
I just decided to collect monkeys. And all the kids thought it was pretty neat, and they said, well, gee, maybe you should get a real monkey. And then I said, well, I don't think that's a good idea. We have too many large trees.
The kids, they liked it so much, they'd go to a yard sale and they'd bring the monkeys back and give them to her.
People just stop, take pictures, and yell out. If we're sitting outside, they yell, awesome, neat, great. And the kids love it. We've got quite a few kids on the road that come up and look at the monkeys.
I was surprised when we first started putting them at home here. The traffic used to speed through here. People would go through the stop sign. Now everybody drives through slow, takes pictures. So we've done one good thing, we slowed the traffic down. There was some people from Ontario that stopped the other day and they were quite amazed. They had never seen anything like that before.
They probably think, what are those two crazy old people doing? You know, putting up all these monkeys.
I was talking to a guy the other day and he brought his kids out to see. And, you know, if the kids appreciate it, we appreciate it.
Well, I'm still collecting monkeys and I'm still going to buy monkeys as long as I can see them at yard sales or at the store or whatever. I'm still collecting.
That's a lot of monkeys. Funny enough, we have a stuffed monkey attached to one of our lights at the moment, and it was put there by my daughter, of course. Even had to feed the monkey this morning, but she's got a lot more monkeys to feed, that's for sure. Thanks for watching CBC Vancouver News tonight. We'll see you tomorrow.